You will not believe what JD Vance just said on the Joe Rogan podcast, because Joe Rogan tried to throw JD Vance some neutral questions, but ended up getting him to admit just how truly he feels about women in America, and how little he really cares. Now, this podcast comes just days after Trump also went on to speak with Joe Rogan to try to gain more support, but just like Trump, this podcast did not go super well for JD Vance. When he was pressed on things like the economy or foreign relations, he gave his usual talking point answers. When asked about vaccines, he said that he didn't believe that they work because he felt sick after he had one. When the interview turned to abortion, however, Vance went off the rails. He apparently doesn't seem to care about the women's vote anymore because Vance decided to make fun of female voters instead of easing their concerns. When Rogan asked how Vance felt about men weighing in on abortion and decades-old laws changing, he claimed that women were the ones who took abortion too far and deserved to have the laws changed because they were celebrating abortion.
Like the concept in the zeitgeist is that abortion had always been, Roe v. Wade had always been the law of the land, and then all of a sudden that was taken away, and you have these religious men who are trying to dictate what women can and can't do with their bodies.
Yeah. No, look, I mean, again, I understand that. I understand the pushback against that, but I think you can go, like with so many other issues, you can go way too far about it, and it becomes trying to celebrate something that at the very best, if you grant, I think, every argument of the pro-choice side, it is a neutral thing, not something to be celebrated.
I think there's very few people that are celebrating that.
At this point, it really seems like Vance and Republicans just don't care anymore. Rogan continued to press the senator, however, and tried to confront him about Republicans wanting to prosecute people for getting an abortion in other states and monitoring people to know if any pregnancies were terminated. And we know these are Republican policies because they are all in Project 2025. JD Vance, however, claimed that he had no idea what Rogan was talking about.
One of the issues is that men are making decisions for what women can and can't do.
I hear that.
And one of the more concerning aspects of this is, like, say if you live in a state like Texas, where there's a limit to when you can get an abortion. I think it's like 6 weeks, which a lot of people think at that point in time you can't even tell whether or not you're pregnant, and this puts a lot of women in like very vulnerable positions. And then there's this thought that they could go to another state where it is legal and have an abortion, but they could be possibly prosecuted for that in their state. That's concerning to me, that we can make, if there's a place in the country where it's legal to have a medical procedure and you live in a state where it's not legal, that your state can decide what you can and can't do with your body, which is essentially based on a religious idea. And a lot of I'm not criticizing it one way or another, but I'm saying that a lot of what this choose life thing is about, that life is precious and life is sacred and life begins at the moment of conception. And some people agree with this, but other people disagree with this. And it seems to be a lot of it is based in religion. My concern is using that to dictate whether or not a person can legally travel to another state. I don't think the government should be monitoring where you travel or what you do when you travel, as long as that thing is legal. And I'm concerned with this idea that you could be prosecuted for it in your state for doing something that's legal somewhere else.
I don't like the idea, to be clear. I've not heard of this, maybe as like a possibility, but not as something that actually exists in the law. But I've not heard of somebody being arrested, and I don't like the idea of arresting people for moving about the country. I haven't heard of them doing it
either. I've heard of the discussion.
I've heard as a threat.
Yes.
We are less than 1 week away from what could be the closest presidential races ever. Today, JD Vance had an opportunity to explain in what ways he and Donald Trump would protect women and their rights, like they keep claiming to do. Instead, however, he said that women needed to lose certain rights because they were too happy about them, and then he continued to lie about Republican policies we are seeing around the country. Republicans like JD Vance have no interest in the rights and freedoms of American women, and next Tuesday, it will cost them at the polls.